You're listening to the Public Health Entrepreneurs Podcast with your host, Dr. Charlotte Huntley. Welcome to the Public Health Entrepreneurs, the podcast for visionary leaders who are ready to transform public health and healthcare through innovation. I'm your host, Dr. Charlotte Huntley, and as a public health entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience in both healthcare and public health, I certainly understand the unique challenges and the opportunities that come along with bridging multiple disciplines. So if you are an interdisciplinary professional, a high-functioning leader with expertise across different fields, then you're in the right place. On the episode today, I want to share with you a question that I received. And the question was, what helps you overcome imposter syndrome? I love this question. So let's dive into it. The first thing I'll say to you, and I've covered this topic on the podcast in the past, but it is perfectly fine to repeat some of these things. The topic is going to continually come up as you go through your journey. So I think we need to continually talk about how to address it. The first thing I'll say is there's no way to really overcome imposter syndrome. And if you have figured out how to overcome it, I really want to hear from you, because I think of it as more as something that we continually address. So I think of it as, how do we address imposter syndrome is probably the question I can answer. And I made a few notes here because it's a little different depending on how it shows up and the circumstances. I'd like to say that I recognize it quickly and I respond really well with all the things I'm going to share with you, but sometimes it's not really pretty. And sometimes I can acknowledge and notice that this is what's happening, but my response lags behind a little bit. I mean, we're human. So the general thing here, you're going to hear a theme with me is like, we need to be more gracious with ourselves. So addressing imposter syndrome. I think there are times that it pops up unexpectedly, but anytime you're stretching and growing, expect it to show up. Anytime you're going to step out and do something that feels a little scary, it's going to show up. And then, like I said, sometimes it's hard to predict and it just shows up when it wants to. But the first thing for me is to acknowledge that this is what's happening. I think when you get to the point that you can acknowledge, oh, this is imposter syndrome rearing its head, then that's a huge accomplishment because there was a time when all these things would happen and I didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand it, or I'd stay in my head about it and I'd be so mean to myself, all the things that we can say. So whenever you can acknowledge it, that's a huge accomplishment. So count that as a win, the fact that you even acknowledge it. Even if you're a little stubborn in the moment or you're not quick to respond and take some action, you at least acknowledge it and you recognize that that is what it is. Now, for me, the next thing is to kind of reframe what you're telling yourself and turn it into some sort of a positive, reaffirming phrase for yourself. Sometimes you can have these already ready. If you notice a pattern where your self-talk is awful, but we need to pay attention to what that is. If you find yourself often saying, you're not smart enough or something along those lines, then maybe having an index card or a sticky note somewhere that says you are intelligent, you are capable, you are bright, those kinds of positive things that you say back to yourself. Having it ready and handy can go a long way. And if you've never done this, don't knock it till you try it. So if you have tried this or you practice this in some way, you know how powerful it is. Just being able to counter that negative self-talk by reframing it into a positive affirmation for yourself is extremely powerful and can go a long way. So part of that is paying attention to what you're saying to yourself that's negative and mean in those moments of imposter syndrome and being able to talk back. That's huge. I think that moving more into this kind self-talk, this being more gracious with yourself and being kind to yourself. Sometimes if you think about it, the things that we say to ourselves that are so mean in those moments of imposter syndrome, we wouldn't dare to say to someone else. And we would not, like if it was your friend, your spouse, your children, you wouldn't stand for someone talking to them that way. So we need to be more kind to ourselves. And that's a huge part of this as well. Another thing that often helps me is perhaps there's a situation that's happening and maybe you made a mistake or maybe you are experiencing an embarrassing moment or it appears as though you're failing. Things aren't flowing like you thought they would. This happens when you're preparing for a presentation. It seems like everything's going wrong. That's when imposter syndrome will pop up and say, well, you shouldn't be doing this anyway. You're not the one, for example, or any other embarrassing moments or moments that you may think of as typically like a moment of failure. if you can redefine success for that situation, this is maybe a more advanced kind of a strategy here. Maybe after you have progressed and you've practiced some of the other steps. So if you can get to the point of redefining success for that situation, it can go a long way. For example, if you decide in a moment of whatever catastrophe may be happening, and you can redefine success. What is success in this moment? It is completing the task. So maybe you're not going to use the slides, or maybe the presentation you prepared is not the one that you deliver, and you just decide to be okay with it. And this is good. Sometimes those are where some of the best moments occur, when everything you've planned for kind of gets thrown up into the air and you have to think on your feet. Instead of allowing imposter syndrome to take over, maybe you can redefine what success is for you in that moment and then just go with it. I've done that so many times. When I was talking about the slides, I actually remember a time when I had flown across country for a speaking engagement, and I prepared a slide deck in advance. I had a day, like a buffer day, before I was going to present. I traveled in, I had a whole day to do whatever I wanted to do, and then the next day I was taking the stage. So in that buffer day, I thought I was going to just have fun. I was in my hotel room. I redid my slides 3 times. I literally had 3 plus the original one. So 4 different slide decks prepared for the presentation, because I just, like, something wasn't settling right. I didn't feel good about it. And there were all sorts of things going through my head. But instead of just getting all caught up in telling myself all the things that I was trying to tell myself, like moving that out, I decided that, I'm feeling uneasy for a reason, and I can investigate why. I didn't know why in the moment, but it wasn't that I wasn't smart enough, or I didn't know my stuff, or I couldn't do a really good job. There was just something else, and I wasn't sure what the something else was, but I had to silence that part of me that was trying to tell myself I wasn't the one, I couldn't do a good job. Turns out, when I got to the next day, I didn't even use slides at all. So I delivered it's really a workshop. It was a full day, morning, lunch, afternoon, full day with no slides at all. But the decision to do this, I could have pushed it, but it turns out I was day 3 of a 3-day event, and my audience was exhausted. It was a small group of leaders, and they had been on strategic planning and all these things the first few days, and they were exhausted by the time I got to day 3. So the uneasy feeling, I think, was maybe an intuitiveness that was like something needed to change. So in that moment, I decided we're not doing slides. I had already delivered, I had them print out some worksheets, and I had some stuff because I wanted to be really engaging and interactive. So we just dismissed the slides altogether. And I presented that full day. It was very engaging. And actually, I decided to pivot a bit, and I gave them an opportunity to be heard. And we were the engaging piece with the worksheets that became the presentation. And we had guided discussions. And actually, everyone was very involved. It was very interactive. The time went by really quickly. Everyone was happy at the end. I was really surprised. But, if I had allowed imposter syndrome to take over, I don't know what that day would have looked like. But it was not a matter of me not knowing what to do, or my slides weren't pretty enough or anything. It was just the fact that I didn't need slides in that moment. I think my audience needed a break. So I pivoted. And so that story is what comes to mind, because that was a huge imposter syndrome moment. And it could have really derailed a good experience. But I just redefined what success meant in that situation. It really was about sharing the message, what I wanted to share with the audience, but the delivery had to change. It wasn't about anything other than that. I had to be flexible enough to know that the delivery of that message was not going to be through a slide deck, but through a conversation and through worksheets. So sometimes being able to redefine success in these situations is a very powerful move. And I think of it as more an advanced move. That's not something you feel strongly about when you're just starting to address imposter syndrome or just starting to recognize it. So first recognize it, and then being able to reframe into something more positive, and then, practice being more kind to yourself. And then these moments to be able to redefine success will also become something that you can add to your toolkit as you address imposter syndrome. So I hope this helps some of you in some way as you continue on this path. But just remember that even though our title says What helps you overcome imposter syndrome? I'm using the question that was presented to me. I don't really think you overcome it. I think that you just learn to address it and you pick up new strategies and ways to address it as you continue on this journey of entrepreneurship. All right, everyone. Until next time, have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for listening. Visit publichealthentrepreneurs.com to learn more.